Okay, President Chen, go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It is Thursday, November 4th, and I'm calling it's now 5:30. I am calling our regularly scheduled meeting to order of the San Mateo Foster City School Board of Trustees. Normally we normally at this time go to and we normally recess right now to close session, but we currently do not have any items. So let me just read this off. At this time, we would typically retreat to closed session to discuss agendized items. For this particular meeting, we have no agendized closed session items. Therefore, we will reconvene our publicly posted regularly scheduled meeting at 6:30. So please tune in at 6:30. Thank you.
Okay, President Chen, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending our meeting. It is now 6:33 and we are convening our regularly scheduled meeting of the San Mateo Foster City School Board of Trustees. It's November 4th, 2021. First order of business is our, I would say it's report out of closed session, but we technically did not have one. So it's item 3.2, which is our flag salute. So if everyone would please unmute yourselves and repeat after me. Okay. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Next order of business is our roll call. Trustee Corzo.
Present.
Trustee Proctor.
Here.
Trustee Watkins.
Here.
And Trustee Warren.
Here.
I'm here as well, so we're all here. Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, tonight's agenda. Does anyone have any questions, comments, additions, changes, or would like to make a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda. I will second.
Great, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? No? All right, let the record reflect that the agenda has been approved 5-0. Next on the agenda at 3.5 is the approval of the minutes for October 21st, 2021. Any changes, corrections, comments? Someone want to make a motion?
I will make a motion to approve the minutes of the October 21st meeting.
I'll second.
Thank you, Trustee Proctor for the motion, Trustee Warren for the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great. And the motion carries. That's 5-0. Next is public statements 4.1. Before we do that, Trustee Corzo, would you mind making the Spanish language translation announcement, please?
Sure. Gracias por estar presentes. Si alguien ocupa traducción, por favor levante su mano o también puede hacer clic en su pantalla donde ven el mundo, el icono del mundo, y ahí pueden cambiar la idioma. Gracias.
Thank you, Trustee Corzo. And then I'll also just make an announcement on, we have about 36 participants on Zoom. If you take away the panelists, it looks like we have about 22 attendees. So item 4.1, public statements. Public statements related to non-agenda topics. The San Mateo Foster City School Board cannot act upon any matter that has not been included and publicly posted on the agenda, except under limited circumstances as permitted by law. The board may refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and or action where appropriate. Please limit your statements to 3 minutes. Opening up to the members and public if they want to make any public statements. No, thank you. Peter, would you mind opening up public comment online for non-agenda topics, please?
Yes, for those of you who might be joining us for the very first time, if you'd like to make public comment regarding anything that is not on the agenda today, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom now, and you'll have your 3 minutes to address the board. Okay, President Chin, it looks like we have no hands for non-agendized items.
Great, thank you, Peter. So we will be moving on to 4.2, which is a statement, public statements related to agenda items. Persons will be called on at the appropriate time. 4.3, the foundation and committee reports. Does anyone have any foundation or committee reports they'd like to announce or report back?
I will just share that there was a DLAC meeting on Tuesday. It was a really good meeting. There were, I believe, 2 co-chairs selected for to be the district to be the, well, they were the co-chairs of the DLAC, the district English Language Advisory Committee. And so in the past, it's been kind of hard to find folks for that role. And this time we had 2 folks willing to step up and do that work together. So that was really positive. There was a lot of education and learning happening in that meeting, and, you know, a deep dive into what it means to be an English learner, what it means to be a long-term English learner, some of the work that's being done through our language programs and our newcomer programs to accelerate learning, and the next steps of that, specifically moving towards elementary school and doing similar work there.
Anyone else for any foundation or committee reports?
We also had a equity task force meeting on the 26th of October. So that was a meeting that was the main purpose of it was to really discuss amongst the equity task force, like what the next steps will be, what the future of the work will be. And there was also, I believe, a subcommittee that was created. And I don't remember the exact name of the subcommittee for some reason. Do you remember? No?
Equity practices.
Oh, equity practices, that's right. Yes, so that work is also moving along, and there was also a really healthy discussion around the kind of like the process for ensuring that we have folks involved in our equity task force that are representative of the students and the communities that are kind of facing the biggest inequities in our district, and making sure that they have a seat at that table and are part of the discussions, and really you know, have a voice in that space.
Great. Sorry, I just wanted to clear my throat, but didn't want to really loudly on the mic. Sorry about that. We had a communications committee meeting yesterday. There was lots of discussion about the communications committee's goals, and also a review of the website, and looking at, in some ways, the technical aspects of the website, and like the code and how it's updated. And there is going to be movement and changes on the website at a future date or in the next few months. But this was sort of the beginning conversation of it, and how do we keep it up to date and modern, and actually also ADA compliant. So that was a big topic of conversation. There was also, I think, actually that is all I have for those reports, Jeff. Anyone else? No? Okay, moving on to item 4.4, which is our SMETA, CSEA, and SMEA updates. Peter, would you mind bringing in our representatives, please?
Good evening, everyone. There's actually not much to report for CSEA, which is probably a good thing, so yay. I did want to take a moment to thank our M&O staff, our school ops team leads, and especially our grounds crew for the cleanup of the storm of 2021. And also whoever was in charge, I know I said this at an earlier meeting, which some people who are here heard already, but whoever was in charge of setting up the vaccination site kudos to you, because that was ridiculously speedy and greatly appreciated by everybody. And that's all that I have.
Good evening. I also don't have a lot to report, but I will echo what Alicia said about the vaccination sites. I've heard nothing but grateful, positive responses about that. I can share that today, at the Strategic Planning Committee, the teachers had the opportunity to work together as a Java-like group. And I know that we all enjoyed that and appreciated the opportunity to work with our colleagues in that way. I would like to share, I think the biggest theme that came through in our conversations was teachers feeling the need for more time to do things, or feeling very pressured. We feel like we're being asked to do a lot of things and it's impacting how well we can do them. We had a lot of conversations about the need for mental health to be placed above academics this year, recognizing that if we're not addressing that, it's almost impossible to move the kids along academically. And that I think we're all seeing, we knew it was going to be a year that would be tough for students, and we didn't know what to anticipate. And I think now that we're seeing it, we're really tired, and we want to do, there's so much that we want to do for kids. And so we're looking forward to the next strategic planning opportunity where we can sort of prioritize and hopefully give teachers some guidance about where to spend our time in ways that we can make sure that we're meeting the needs of students. So that's all I have for tonight. And thank you.
President Chin, I think we might be having some technical difficulties with the SMEA representative, so maybe we can provide a written report and update to you guys for the official record.
Thank you, Peter, for that. And that sounds good with me if you guys are okay. Nodding, yeah, I see that. Okay. Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Alicia, for your updates. Okay, moving on to item 4.5, announcements. Does anyone have any announcements they would like to make?
I just wanted to make an announcement about the Ed Foundation Gala. So just a huge thank you to everyone who attended, who worked on getting the word out, who to Superintendent Ochoa and Dr. Rosas for hosting an incredible event, for some of our district administrators and leadership, and just everyone that was involved in the planning and the process. So it was a really successful event. We're still figuring out final tally, but it seems like we raised about $160,000 from the gala, which is incredible, and will go to support experiential learning, things like maker spaces, and some outdoor gardens. And so sites will have the opportunity under that umbrella to determine what makes the most sense for them. Some more to come in terms of final tallies, but just really grateful to everyone for your involvement in that. I just wanted to give everyone an update.
Thank you. That's some great news for the Ed Foundation. And congratulations, and thanks for all your hard work too on that. Any other announcements? No? Okay, I was going to make an announcement that, and I don't know, Superintendent Cho, if these are going to be part of your remarks, but I thought we just got an email about San Mateo County's mass vaccinations for 5 to 11. So I'm sure everyone's heard that kids for the CDC have been approved for vaccinations, and I've heard some friends even getting their child's vaccinations today. So it's all very excited. We have our own school district vaccination on November 15th, which I'll let Superintendent Ochoa talk about. But I just wanted to call out that beyond the local pharmacies, CVS, Rite Aid, Safeway, Walgreens, Costco, and Lucky are having their own appointments that you can make. San Mateo County is using the event center for mass vaccinations, and they will be having vaccinations for kids 5 to 11 on Saturday, this Saturday in 2 days from 9 to 4, next Wednesday the 9th from 2:30 to 7, next Thursday, the 10th from 2:30 to 7, next Friday, the 12th from 2:30 to 7, and next Saturday as well, the 13th from 9 to 4. So the goal is to get as many people vaccinated as they want. And I would encourage anyone who is interested to either sign up on the county's website, which is they're using actually the state's, which is My Turn, to get an appointment, or look at your local pharmacies and get an appointment there. Or also, which I'm going to lead right into the superintendent report on our own site at Bayside. Oh, Trustee Corzo has something else to add before we get to Superintendent Choa. But that's my update. I just wanted to let everyone know that the San Mateo County, while not widely publicized, is having events for children 5 to 11. Trustee Corzo.
So I did just want to take a second to acknowledge that November is Native American Heritage Month. And so I just want to take a second and do like a land acknowledgement, and also honor the Ramaytush Ohlone people that lived here for thousands of years before anyone else got here. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other last minute announcements? Okay, item 4.6, Superintendent Ochoa.
Thank you, President Chen. I'm going to keep my remarks focused on our November 15th vaccination event at Dr. Joan Rosas Gymnasium at Bayside Academy. We have a plan to implement vaccinations in concert with San Mateo County and Safeway, our partners for the event. Members of the community, as you know, I sent out a communication to all families in the district that we were able to get the 500 appointments scheduled by within 20 minutes of basically sending out the message to families. So I think there's a very, very high demand and a lot of interest in getting these vaccinations for our 5 to 11-year-olds. I want to thank Dennis Hills and his team for helping strategize on site at Bayside Academy. I want to thank Diego Perez for his excellent work in creating the visuals and coordinating the QR codes, the email link, sending it out to the district. I want to thank Patrick Gaffney and Mark Herrera and their team for joining us at Bayside Academy to be able to prep for the event. So it's basically going to work like this. The school has a minimum day that day for parent-teacher conferences, which end right at 3. So there will be lots of parking space. And then families with those 3 o'clock appointments are going to walk up to the Dr. Joan Rosas Gymnasium, and there's going to be really clear signage routing folks to the appropriate entrance. Within minutes, they'll be in the door. Those who bring their paperwork ready to submit will just walk right in, and others might need to fill out a consent form on site. We'll have them in English and Spanish. They get their vaccine. They wait for 15 minutes and then they're free to leave. So it's going to be a very streamlined event. We do know that after some time, there is going to be a line that forms because people will be excited to be there and get their vaccination. So we have some ideas of giving out information about district programs, promoting upcoming enrollment and registration dates and times. Just earlier today, the team was making plans to have activities for kids to do while they wait in line. A couple of special guests that will join us there that I can't share any information about now, but it will be fun for the kids. So we're really excited. We want to thank our partners at the county office and thank our partners with Safeway for considering us. A message to the community: we are interested in hosting more of these events. So when those doses do become available, the message that we've given is call on us. We're ready. We can turn on a dime. So those individuals who are coordinating these events know that we're interested in hosting more. And I look forward to be able to offer those to our community as they become available. And with that, I'll close my remarks.
Thank you, Superintendent Ochoa. Very exciting news, I think, this week for all of us with the announcement of the kids vaccination is actually very exciting. So, all right, moving on to the proposed consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered by the board to be routine and will be enacted by the board in one motion in the form listed below. There will be no discussion on these items prior to the time the board votes on the motion unless members of the board, staff, or public request specific items be removed and discussed from the consent agenda. The superintendent and staff recommend approval of all consent items. Movement of any recommended consent item is appropriate at this time. Does anyone have anything that they want to move? No? Shake your head.
I don't want to remove anything, but I just do want to bring up the fact that we have 2 new NPA contracts, the non-public agency contracts. We're contracting with Stepping Stones for OT to cover a resignation at George Hall, I understand. And then also we have 1 student receiving services through CAIO Autism to the tune of $66,720 for 1 student.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing going to be pulled, Peter, would you mind asking the audience, assuming no one in the public here? Thank you. Peter, if you wouldn't mind, please.
For those that may be attending via Zoom and would like to make public comment on any of the items on the agenda, please use the raise your hand functionality in Zoom now, and then I'll ask you what specific agenda item you'd like to make public comment on. Okay, President Chin, it looks like we have no hands to make comment on any consent agenda item.
Great, thank you, Peter. Bringing it back to the board for motion and or further discussion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
One second.
Thank you, Trustee Corzo for the motion, Trustee Proctor for the second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? No? Okay, the consented calendar has been approved 5-0. We are now moving on to item 6.1. Superintendent Ochoa.
Thank you, President Chin. Tonight's presentation, item 6.1, is in reference to an item that we're looping back for the board. I'm going to share my screen in just a minute. This is a proposal from a consultative organization that the board sought services from in November of 2020, pertaining to North Central San Mateo, the prospect of a new school there, as well as conducting work on behalf of the district, again with Bond Limited. So tonight's presentation to the board is a request that the board consider continuing this relationship with Bond to specifically follow up on the work that was begun from November to June. I'm presenting now to the public and to the board this summary of the district's request for support. And essentially what it boils down to is that in the June 2021 school board meeting where the presentation from Bond was made, recommendations were given regarding the school in the potential school in North Central San Mateo, but also feedback that the Bond consultants were able to derive from their many focus groups and interviews pertaining to the experiences of families who have children that live in North Central San Mateo, but attend other schools throughout the district. So from there, a conversation with Bond started to take place regarding the importance of addressing the potential North Central San Mateo school and the design of that school, to request that Bond assist us with that process. In addition to Bond's strong desire and my strong recommendation that the work have a parallel process where we engage in analysis now and strategies now to be able to, sorry, I was just, to be able to address equity issues that started to surface during that 7-month consultative period from November until June of 2021. I'll take you now to the next page here. The proposal is as follows. Number one, in this proposal pertaining to implementing actions that respond to needs for this year. The first is to facilitate process mapping. For example, literacy for English learners and North Central San Mateo parent engagement. Number two, to design and implement a collaborative district equity review. Number three, to utilize both processes to inform district-wide actions to address student needs and inform strategic action planning efforts. The support deliverables are as follows, specifically providing greater clarity in the problem. Initiating this service is a recognition that it is a starting point for a future intervention. A deep analysis of the context is going to allow the school district to be able to identify priority areas for focused development and improvement, because the equity issues facing our students and that our district can grapple with are not issues that are resolved easily. And they're not issues that are addressed in a short time frame. But this consultative work will provide that external eye, that external expertise to be able to assist our efforts in making the San Mateo Foster City School District more equitable for all students, and certainly for the families whose feedback brought this issue to our attention. So that's step one. That's the first proposal from PAN. I want to pause here and allow the board to ask for any clarification before I move on to part two. President Chin, we don't typically do this during presentations, but because it does have this two-part process, I want to also be able to give the public an opportunity to ask any questions about this particular component of the proposal. So clarification, and then give the public an opportunity to ask any clarifying questions also.
Sure. Okay. Does anybody have any clarifying questions about step one? Trustee clarifications? No questions? Okay. Peter, unless the public, thank you for shaking your head. Peter, would you mind asking the public, we're going to break this into two parts. So for the public, we'll take public comment on step one, and then we'll do it again for step two.
Mm-hmm.
So Peter, if you wouldn't mind asking the public if they'd like to comment.
Absolutely. If there are any members of the public that would like to make comment on this particular item, or at least this mark, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom now. President Chen, we have no hands for public comment.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent Choa, part two.
Perfect. Thank you. For proposal two, I'm going to project to the board as well as to the public. And this is a consultative request to specifically develop a community-based school design for North Central San Mateo, with the presumption that the current site of College Park is included a $23 million infusion of funding for new facilities. And that's a very important and clear recommendation as part of this consultative contract. And the reason is that if the design of the school is built around the concept of a community-based wraparound services school, then the current facility at College Park is not going to facilitate that. The physical environment does not yet have the elements and the buildings and the components needed to truly serve as a wraparound services, deep implementation of community programs in that community. So the goals of this proposal is to recruit, develop, and build capacity of a school design team and a design community. And number two, to facilitate the development of a school framework by the design team and the design community. Those are two strategies, two areas of focus that need to take place as part of a process that's a cycle. So the identification, the development, and the capacity building is taking place all the while the initiation of that development of the school framework is taking place. So there's an element where the community of the group is developing, but also each session, each benchmark along the way, the school framework is coming more and more into focus. The deliverables are to build capacity and carry out a multi-year plan to open a culturally and linguistically responsive community school. That was key and essential in the original feedback that was received from the North Central San Mateo stakeholders that met with BUN. Number 2, to develop that school vision and mission, the program details, which is essential, and then to begin establishing the work of, or to begin the work of establishing school partnerships. Again, the idea, the very initial idea is a wraparound services community-based school program in North Central San Mateo. There are very clear benchmarks for when this work is to take place. It would, assuming board approval were to take place this evening, it would initiate immediately. And as you can see, the process is one where there are very natural timeframes where updates are brought to the board and to the community so that the work continues along schedule, and so that the process is designed to achieve a result showing there June 2022, the board would be presented with the work products of that design team, the published school framework, and essentially the groundwork for that school in North Central San Mateo. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board for any clarifying questions and to the public for any comment.
Thank you, Superintendent Ochoa. I'll just ask one real quick clarifying question. There's actually 2 proposals in the proposal. Are you asking us to approve both of them?
My recommendation is that we approve both.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Does anyone else have any clarifying questions? No. Okay, any member of the public has any clarifying questions? No, thank you. Peter, would you mind asking those who are joining us online, please?
Yes, any who are joining online and would like to make public comment, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom now. Okay, we have Randy. Randy, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. So is this something that is, if I understand the agenda correctly, is this something that is up for a vote tonight? And then, okay, so this is the attachment for the presentation is not in the agenda. I don't know if that was intended or not. So the first time to be able to take a look at that for any of the public is just like what we saw now, and that wasn't a lot of time to be able to see the detail. So one question. So following that second part, you know, there wasn't an opportunity for like public to ask questions, just to comment. But so the question is it stated there, or and first of all, I am 100% fully on board with North Central having a school in North Central and having it be a full-sized school at the College Park site. But I'm just curious whether it's been said then, what happens with the Mandarin immersion program? Where does it go? And has that been communicated out? I don't think I've heard anything like, you know, communicated out to the district more broadly. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, next we have Marcella. Marcella, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I actually was looking forward to seeing this information, and so I'm glad I got to see it in the meeting. I do wish it had been posted to the agenda ahead of time so that we could have had the opportunity to more thoroughly review it. But my broader comment is about the process in general. I wanted to just point out how intentional this process has been from the start. And I hope that we can utilize this framework as we consider how we serve all of our students district-wide. So this idea of wraparound support and community services, the need is acute in North Central and also exists throughout the district. So I'm hoping that as we engage in this process, we're doing it with an eye towards how we can also better support the rest of the schools as well, and use this as a model, because I am super excited about the build out and who was listened to and how the community was engaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella. Okay, President Chin, we have no other hands for public comment.
Great, thank you for providing public comment. I think Superintendent Cho, do we need a second? Okay. Do you want to maybe address it? Yeah,
I do.
Thank you.
In our board item, there is a drop down. It's really a sort of a point and click function for each of the items. It should have been public. It shows in the system as it being listed as a public item, but I just had our staff looking into it now. For whatever reason, the agenda online also has a private function, so it was added to the agenda, but it was not visible to the public. So I do apologize for that. That's never the intent to, withhold an item, the backup documentation item. For me, that's a sort of particular, a major thing for me. So I do apologize for that.
Do we have, I'll just ask the question, do we have authority then to go ahead and approve this item or continue this? I mean, I guess the question, should we continue this to the next meeting, or should we go ahead and go through our normal process on this agenda item?
What we're required to do is agendize the meeting. The access to the information does need to be equal or fair to any group that has an interest in the district's work. Our district staff is making the item available for public inspection now. I did present the item itself on the meeting, during the meeting, so I really leave it up to the board. My recommendation is that we approve the item. The item itself is a follow-up to a presentation that was given in June, so it is not a new item. There was an expectation that actually this would happen, during this time of year, sometime between September and now. The omission of the backup documentation for that item is a clerical error, and I do apologize for that, but having the explanation listed there for what the item is, in my opinion, meets the standard of having the item be approved, and we did agendize the item itself. But I will leave it to the board for your determination.
Thank you, Superintendent Cho. I guess, are we going to get the item up onto the website now? Yes, I see some shaking the heads. Thank you. Yep. So actually, I was going to make a suggestion. We have 2 or 3 other items. Maybe we just continue this to the end of the meeting, allow the public to go ahead and take a look at the documents online if they do, and then we can go ahead and vote on it at the end, unless anyone else has any other comments about that or thoughts. Unless anyone feels comfortable that we should go ahead and act on this at this moment.
I was going to make one other suggestion. I mean, I don't know if people may want to be paying attention to the other things that we're talking about tonight. So one thing I was going to say, and was going to ask Superintendent Ochoa, is whether we have our discussion now based on, the information that we have, vote, and then what would be I mean, the process for a potential amendment, should there be public comment at a future, say we have public comment then at the next meeting and we would be able to make some sort of amendment if there was the need to do so based on public comment. Could be another approach. I guess I say that thinking that there probably won't be so much that we would need to amend the contract, but that would give people an opportunity to review it over like a normal amount of time and be able to come back and make comment. And then if we needed to, we could, but versus rushing people to review it in the next hour.
That is true. I am open to whatever the board is.
I'm just thinking in my experience with contracts is once they're signed, work will begin. So I'm not sure that we would have to obviously go back to Pam and see if they agree with any adjustments. So personally, I'm ready to move forward just because we've talked about this so much and I think we've all been kind of in agreement with moving forward. But whatever you guys think.
And the item is live now.
Okay, thank you. I would agree, Trustee Barter. I think we're sort of, if I had to think about where we're all leaning on this, I think we're all probably the same way. And I do know that there is some timing issues to this because we want them to start work right away because we want to get moving on this. But I don't know. I'd love to hear from the other trustees just to chime in.
I would really like to discuss. I don't want there to be any delays for this work to begin, so.
I'm just going to echo that. You know, this is information that we've received before. We received it back in June. Matter of fact, I thought I was looking at the same presentation when I read through this proposal. Just one comment that I would like to make. Through my other life as a nurse, I do want to recognize the fact that we do have some dialects spoken almost exclusively. I'm thinking Ms. Tekin and Triki are two that I've seen, you know, throughout my work. And I just want to make sure that those families are being included in the process as well, because I know that some of them don't even speak Spanish. So I just want to make sure that all voices are truly being heard.
Great, thank you, Trustee Warren and Trustee Corzo for chiming in. So it sounds like why don't we go ahead and discuss this and act on it if everyone feels comfortable. Any further discussion on this at all? On the item itself, I should say.
I mean, I'll just say that we're moving on from discussing whether or not we're voting on it. We're actually talking about it.
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, again, I think that this is information that we've had and that we've discussed, and we were all in alignment at the time that we were going to kind of move in forward with these kind of two separate elements of the work. I'm really excited for the work to get started. My only comment is around just alignment with some of the work that's happening with the strategic planning process, and just wanting to make sure, I mean, the part about the strategic planning process, I mean, that's really exciting and I think motivating, is just having alignment, all working in the same direction. And the timeline of this proposal will receive, you know, information from the kind of equity analysis that we may want to use in informing the strategic planning process, but we will kind of have already started moving in a particular direction. So I just want us to be thinking about, I'm not saying it shouldn't happen or that, you know, I think that's just kind of where we are in terms of timeline, but I think that we'll need to think about how to integrate this information into potentially making adjustments to strategic plan or allocating resources differently or whatever the case may be, and that we just kind of build that into, and it's probably just best practice in general, right? To be reviewing the strategic plan, to be looking at data, to be thinking about how to pivot and make adjustments based on what we know. And this is just going to be another piece of data, but just kind of wanting to highlight that because I don't want this to be then something new that isn't aligned and all of that. So that's kind of the thing that I'm sitting with, but otherwise super excited about the work and grateful to Pan for being involved. So thank you.
I am also excited for this process. I was wondering, Superintendent Ochoa, if you might speak a little bit to Randy's question about the conversations that might have happened or will happen with people, students that are already at College Park in the Mandarin Immersion Program. We don't have very many people on the line tonight, but maybe this might be something that people will be hearing for the first time.
President Chen, thank you, Trustee Proctor. A couple of different strategies. Well, one is the work that's taking place as it pertains to this proposal is the definition of the group is the families that are impacted by North Central San Mateo that live in that neighborhood community. So there's definitely going to be some deep outreach work that takes place there. For the families that are currently at College Park, for the students that are currently at College Park, the work so far has taken place on the superintendent to family level, starting back in August of 2021, as well as September, and actually recently just this week, a meeting of stakeholders from the College Park community meeting with me to think about the proposal that's being made tonight, to give an opportunity for questions. I think that school community is very interested in having more engagement with the district about where the future will lead for that school. The input that I've given the parents and the stakeholders that I've met with thus far is that those conversations are still a few months down the line, but it won't be something where it's another year or 2 years or 3 years down the line for us to initiate those conversations. As far as the student side of it, we haven't done that yet, but I am open to starting a process to engage with those, with our students as well.
Thank you. I think I meant families, but
oh, sorry about that.
Students. Yeah, I mean, I just said students, but
yeah.
But thank you. I'm really looking forward to this process and seeing us move forward with this.
Great. Any other last minute comments?
Yeah. I was just waiting to share that I'm also really excited about us approving this contract and PAN Consulting beginning this work. I think it's gonna lead to a lot of tangible, concrete, positive change that is really going to impact students. And I also want to say that it might not always be comfortable work. It shouldn't be comfortable work, not for anyone, for us included, right? So I just want to ask folks to kind of mentally prepare for that and you know, reflect on like our system and like where there are equities, where there are inequities. Sorry, I didn't say that right, but anyways. Yeah, I'm really excited about, you know, North Central getting the focus that it needs, and for the district-wide equity review, I think we've needed something that goes this in depth for a long time, and it's going to make our district better for every single kid. So I'm excited about it, and you know, it's going to just help us fine tune the work that's already begun, that's already started. It's going to kind of, you know, offer training to everyone so that we can be more mindful of how to identify where there are kind of gaps in our system. So really excited about it. And yeah, I'm just excited that the community will have, you know, this amazing school that really uplifts all children and families, and that's really well deserved and has been for a long time.
Great. Yeah. So what was our Nicole Anderson, our consultant for the Equity Task Force and the Equity Network? She used to say, we need to live, or we need to be comfortable in the discomfort, or the discomfort is where we all actually live and make actions on. So I would agree that there's
Very true.
obviously always going to be some tough decisions and actions that we have to make. My one comment before we actually get to a vote, if someone wants to make a motion, is that I would definitely agree with Trustee Watkins. I feel like we have a number of things that are sort of running in parallel, including the strategic plan and then this process as well. And I hope that this can get off the ground quickly so that it can actually help impact and provide some input, whether the strategic plan or the PAN recommendations sort of overlap and basically are aligned. So I would definitely agree with what Trustee Watkins said. Okay, with that, does anyone want to make a motion on this item?
I'd like to motion to approve this item.
I'll second.
Thank you, Trustee Corzo for the motion, Trustee Watkins for the second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? No? Then the motion has carried 5-0. Okay, we are moving on to item, 6.2, which is our agenda builder. Superintendent Ochoa.
Thank you, President Chen. Item 6.2 is a return item of a presentation that was given to the board pertaining to a governance process that I'm recommending to the board we initiate for the 21-22 school year, in which we publicly announce expected presentations and align those presentations to months within our governance calendar. Couple of weeks back, we made this presentation to the board, and various items for changes and recommendations and feedback were given at the time. And what I'm presenting to the board tonight includes those changes, and I'll walk you through what those changes are. I'll present this in just a second here. Here we go. And so first and foremost, the implementation of a glossary, and the idea here, President Chin, is to, as we move down the year process, add in more explanations or definitions of what some of the languages that we use on the chart. Here we have a description for the CASP, for LCAP, for the 2 budget reviews, and for strategic plan. And the idea is to try to give some just information for a person who doesn't live in this world of educational jargon to be able to understand what these agenda items are. Again, this is something we can add to and clarify as we move on throughout the year. And then the second example of an update that was made to the agenda builder was the inclusion of more presentations to the board on items of concern and interest that aligned more with the appropriate timeframes for presentations to take place. So examples are including additional special education updates, moving items from July meetings to August meetings because of a tradition of not holding meetings in July, and then trying to align agenda items in such a way that doesn't overload meetings such as December, which is traditionally, again, I think, you know, the reference made to it at the last meeting was that it's a light meeting. And so that is reflected in this calendar. And then Trustee Proctor indicated an interest in being able to add items that were more items of the day or items of a non pre-scheduled nature, such as in these tonight's presentation, the North Central San Mateo School Design item, the middle school math pathways items that'll be at the upcoming November meeting, and then the project labor agreement that again is going to be brought to the board on November 18th, but it's not something that we would pre-schedule and review every single year. Whereas the items that are in the black are expected to be pre-scheduled, and you should expect the presentation on the items that are listed in those aligned months that are provided in this calendar. So that's my presentation for the board. I want to turn it over to the board or the public for any questions pertaining to this agenda builder governance calendar.
Great, thank you, Superintendent Ochoa. And just for clarification, our December meeting tends to, for those who don't historically watch us on December, but that's usually the first meeting of our new trustee after a recent election. And that's also the reorganization of the board and all of our committee assignments. So our December meeting tends to be very governance heavy in some ways, where we do a lot of reorganization of the board itself. So that's generally what happens. We're definitely open to having items on the December meeting, and we have, but I just wanted to clarify that. Any other clarifying questions from the board? No, okay. Any members of the public have any questions? No, thank you. And then anyone online, please, Peter, if you wouldn't mind asking.
Any members of the public who are joining us via Zoom and would like to make public comment on this item, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom now. Okay, President Chen, we have no hands for public comment.
Thank you. I'm going to close public comment on this item, bring this back to the board for any clarifying questions. Any board discussion or, I'm sorry, we're not voting on this item, are we?
I think we are.
I apologize for that.
My apologies, President Chen.
Yes, we are adopting it, right? Okay, any further discussion?
I just had two comments or suggestions, I guess, for amendments. And if the rest of the board agrees, I can then make a motion with, those amendments. Two of the things that I had asked about the last time that we talked about this was to have updates around our professional learning, professional development, and just, those kinds of things, which I think I found helpful. So adding those in the places where it makes sense based on when that is happening. In addition to having presentations from some of our committees included. So CDAC, Equity Task Force, DLAC, Sanctuary Task Force. So again, if folks are in agreement, I would like to have those included and could then make a motion with those amendments.
Any other further discussion? Sorry, go ahead.
I can go ahead and say something. Thank you, Superintendent Ochoa, for coming up with this calendar. I think making it public will help our members of the public know what's coming up as well. In terms of what Trustee Watkins was saying about updates on professional development, I can see that falling in when we're talking about like the preschool program update. I would love to know, and make that a part of that presentation, that what PD is available for preschool. Same thing around student achievement. I see areas where that can be part of the presentations, and I would hope that that would just be an expected thing that you're going to be presenting on your program. You will include a part of that presentation as professional development. I think that we just need to make that an expectation of our presenters. Same thing with the like, for example, CDAC. That's historically part of the special education update. I would love to see like the DLAC and the Sanctuary Task Force and that included as well. I don't really see a whole lot of places. I'm looking through this governance calendar, where there seems to be natural places to put in those updates. So maybe if we can find those, places to put those updates, we could do that as well.
Trustee Watkins, can I ask a clarifying question? When you were referring to professional development, were you thinking district-wide? For a second there, I thought you might be referring to the board professional development, which, okay, thank you. I was just going to say, yes, yeah, thank you, because I know we have CSBA coming up, which is our annual conference, and then there's also Masters in Governance for trustees, but thank you for that clarification. Anyone else want to make any comments on the agenda or any of the comments of our two trustees have made? I guess one thing, Superintendent Ochoa, I'll make comments. So thank you for the little glossary at the beginning. Like I had mentioned last time, I think we all live in the sort of the alphabet soup of acronyms that the district uses, not just our district, but every district. So I'm happy for that because that makes it a little bit more user-friendly for the public. And so I appreciate that. The agenda builder, the way that I've always understood it, at least the ones that we had before and that was posted, it was sort of a living document. And so as things came up, things were added. Is the intent that we approve this and this is sort of static, or the idea of what Trustee Proctor, Trustee Watkins and Trustee Warren had brought up about the other items, are those easy sort of to add, or is this like all or nothing?
So the idea behind adding the green language, the language that's in the green font, is that as the year progresses and we have items that are presented that are not of a pre-scheduled, sort of kind of etched in stone manner, those would be added throughout the year. The professional development addition will be aligned to our district professional development days. We have 3 this year, 1 in September, 1 in January, 1 in March. And so that those will we can pre-schedule in advance. The committee meeting presentations will need to coordinate with the chairpersons of those committees to determine the months of the year that a presentation from those committees is either preferred or recommended. As Trustee Warren pointed out, CDAC is included in the special education updates that are made to the Board of Trustees. So each time it indicates special education, I'll go into the document and include CDAC listed there as part of that presentation. And then for our other groups, the Sanctuary Task Force, the Equity Task Force, I'm having a senior moment. The other district groups that committees that we coordinate with, I will bring that on an ongoing basis and add those items to the agenda builder as well. So it's definitely a living document.
Just one more thing, Superintendent Ochoa, what I would love to see with our presentations is, like an expectation that as the presentation is being made about the program or whatever we're highlighting, that the professional development piece would be part of that presentation. So that, we are getting that information, but not necessarily on its own. I think it makes more sense to have that information in context of the greater presentation. Like for example, with math pathways, I want to make sure that I know that these math teachers are receiving professional development. So I would expect that to be part of that presentation.
Okay, any last minute comments?
Can I just ask, just so I'm understanding clearly? So we're asking for 2 things. And I just want to make sure that we all have consensus about wanting to add these things. So Shara, you asked for information for professional development to be included. And then Lisa, can you remind me what you wanted specifically? I had a little bit of trouble following it, so.
Certainly. Well, I mean, I do agree with Trustee Watkins that, you know, having an update on how we're teaching our teachers to teach our students is important. I don't know if we need it to be its own presentation. I would like to see professional development included as part of the greater conversation. And so it's basically more of a directive on, like, again, the example being special education or the math update. How are we teaching our math teachers? You know, what professional development are we giving them? And I would like to see that as part of their presentation of the pathway. Special education, I would love to see what professional development is going on with that. It seems a little disjointed to me to have it as its own presentation outside of the context of what we're talking about.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So why don't we kind of, it sounds like you both have a similar ask, but different approaches. So why don't we kind of gauge where everyone else is at, and then we'll be able to give like clear direction.
Muted.
I'm muted. I'm not unmuted. Okay, I'm just gonna make just one thing. I guess my recommendation would be that we decide whether or not it's something we want, and that district staff determines what best fits. But I'm just throwing that out there. So I'd be fine with either approach. I'm not committed. I think whatever seems to make the most sense. If it aligns best to the PD calendar, let's do that. If it aligns best in the way that Trustee Warren's saying, but I would defer to how they think it best fits, as long as we're getting the information. For me, that's what's important.
Okay, absolutely. I agree with that. So I think, yeah, I just want to say I appreciate that both of you like elevated that. At first I was like, wait, what? Like I was trying to understand like where it would be, and like kind of, I guess, the how, not the what. But I agree. I think it's good to just, you know, defer to staff on how to move forward with that piece. And so unless anybody wants to add anything, should I motion? I kind of want to just motion to approve it as is and just let staff figure out does that sound okay? Or does anybody else want to add something?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'll hold off on my motion then. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say.
I was just going to add that in terms of professional development, when basically students are at home and there's a whole day of professional development, as both a school board member and a parent, I am kind of curious what took place. And so to me, and I leave it up to the district staff as well, but like I'm most curious, like right afterwards, like what happened. And so if it was a timely update as to what happened that whole day and what was presented and what are the topics, then that would be helpful. But of course, if it makes more sense to put it with each committee presentation, then that's fine too.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like, again, I guess I'm thinking now like about the how, because I'm thinking like, would that be more timely like in like the podcast? Would that be more timely in like a newsletter that's like right after? But I mean, we're meeting also very regularly, so I don't know, but I get that. That makes a lot of sense. I too, as a parent, sometimes I'm like, oh, I wonder what they're doing.
Yeah.
And also, like, how did people like it, and did they get a lot out of it, and did they, you know, that kind of thing, feedback.
Yeah, I feel like we have in the past had like survey data shared out.
I think too, we have to, you know, as a parent, I would love to know what the teachers are doing, because I'm stuck at home with my children, which I love dearly, but I thank you all for taking care of my children for 6.5 hours a day. Superintendent Ochoa, how would you like to approach this? Like, what would, you know, your feedback? You've been in this business for a lot longer than any of us have. You know, like, give us your feedback. I would love to hear it.
My recommendation is that because we have 3 during the school year predetermined professional development dates that are calendared and scheduled, that we coordinate a presentation for the board aligned to those dates, and that our team of educators who coordinate the trainings have some structure, some process and protocol of defining the feedback that the board is going to receive afterward, to celebrate the work that took place on those training days, and also give an opportunity for the community and the board to understand what work has taken place. But by predetermining the dates, then we can zero in on an analysis and a reflection on the presentations that took place. And the only reason is that we have professional development taking place in so many different areas throughout the district, at so many levels, that it would be a disservice to not take advantage of these predetermined dates that are in the calendar.
Trustee Chin, did you want to add anything? I feel like you're the only one that hasn't gotten to share, so just wondering where you're at.
No, I think this is a great discussion to have. I mean, the comments I've had you referenced in the past, we have had professional development updates in the past. I recall knowing like how many, like a percentage of how many teachers or how many, who, when, where, and what. I also think some of it maybe might have been related to COVID, but yeah, I'm completely fine with that. I think leaving up to the district to decide what to do is great. So I'm completely open to having professional development added to the calendar. Yeah. So I'm open if anyone wants to make a motion.
I motion to approve this agenda builder.
I'll second.
Okay, we have, thank you, Trustee Corzo for the motion, Trustee Warren for the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes 5-0. Thank you. All right, we are moving on to our next agenda item, which is the update on the annex program, 7.1.
Good evening, Superintendent Ochoa and Board of Trustees. This evening, we have an annual update for you, or hopefully our annual update on our annex program. As you may know, our annex program is operating in 17 schools this year. It's a before and after school program. And the leadership team is here this evening to share their presentation with you. With that, I'd like to introduce to you Danielle Tremaine, the principal, and Tiffany Canaris, the coordinator. Thank you.
Hey, good evening. We are happy to be here to share information about this valuable program and the dedicated staff who make it possible. As Dennis said, my name is Danielle Tremaine. I am the principal on special assignment.
And I'm Tiffany Canaris. I'm the annex coordinator.
Tonight, we'll share some information about our program, dive into some details about our enrollment, and review some considerations for the upcoming school year and future of our program.
The annex was established about 25 years ago as an enterprise fund to generate income for the district. Annex tuition covers the entire cost of running the program, including all salaries and benefits, custodial supplies, and expenses related to HR, in addition to an annual contribution to the general fund.
As the needs of our community has changed, so has the annex. So we currently provide before and after school care at 17 elementary school sites and about 750 students. 4 years ago, the annex staff worked on our mission to update it. to match the staff's commitment to quality care and learning opportunities. Our staff pride themselves on the relationships that they have with families and teachers, and the connections that they build with students, and the support that they provide in facilitating those connections between the parents and teachers.
So the annex is staffed with the most caring and committed adults around. You may be a little biased, but each site is supported by classified staff that holds 3 different titles. We have a 1:20 staff student ratio named to have full programs. In the chart on the right, you can see that we are not full at all sites. This is a result of staffing challenges, a need for financial aid, and a request for flexible scheduling. In the past, Annex offered fee-based camps during the school breaks. Due to low student enrollment, this practice has been discontinued.
Families are able to register for the annex located on their school campus for full-time before and after school care. We offer online registration and bill pay, including auto pay. To assist with this online application, we have multiple ways of supporting families. So we have a dedicated support line. We offer one-on-one support in 2 different evening events, both in English and in Spanish. And we also work with the school AAs and community workers to ensure that families have access to these applications in a timely manner. All of our annex programs include 3 major components. So academic support, indoor and outdoor enrichment activities that are age appropriate, and a nutritious snack from our very own child nutrition department that meets the USDA regulations.
Annex staff participate in 2 professional development days each year that are aligned to the district goals. This year, and most recently, the focus has been mental health and trauma-informed practices, and we'll continue that with our 2nd professional development day coming up in January. Ongoing support is also provided at monthly lead teacher meetings to address relevant issues. In partnership with the district, all annex staff will receive CPR and first aid certifications.
The district received state funding in 2007 from the After School Education and Safety Grant. This grant provides funding to youth at specific school sites to provide academic and literacy support and safe, constructive alternatives after school. We reapply every 3 years and send annual and quarterly reports to the state. This competitive grant is awarded to schools based on free and reduced price meal percentages, and those rankings against statewide applicants. So we currently serve students at Fiesta Gardens, George Hall, Lead, and Sunnybray, and intend to seek funding for San Mateo Park and Laurel Elementary Schools this year, for next year.
As we look into the future, one of the biggest challenges that we, like many others, are facing is a lack of staffing. We are unable to expand our program safely and serve more students without additional staff. In addition, employee costs continue to rise and impact tuition. We feel strongly that having district employees run our program ensures high quality and supports the homeschool connection. This comes at a cost, however, with approximately 30% added to wages for health benefits and retirement. Even at our current rates, our tuition is comparable to programs in neighboring districts. We generally raise fees annually and plan to do so again for the 22-23 school year.
You may notice the large increase in tuition fees between the 19-20 and 21-22 school years. This is not typical and was due to the change in programming as a result of the pandemic. Our staff offered full-time learning hubs to our families starting on the first day of school. Lastly, the annex is always looking for ways to support the homeschool connection with district programs. Beyond building partnerships with teachers and parents, the annex will begin supporting some district programs like Footsteps to Brilliance, a bilingual literacy program, and is looking to support the implementation of Second Step, which is the SEL curriculum that's already in our classrooms, in the after school programs. So that concludes our presentation and we're open to questions.
Great, thank you for the presentation. And I think it's okay to be biased. Any clarifying questions from the board?
Yeah, I just had one around the ACES grant. I am very glad to hear that you are working towards getting the funding for our other 2 Title I schools, San Mateo Park and Laurel. My question is around the fact that Fiesta Gardens and George Hall are no longer considered Title I. Do we lose the funding from that, or is it just ours like indefinitely, or at least every 3 years when you reapply?
So we're grandfathered in as long as we meet the attendance requirements. So that's where we aim to have filled all our spaces. The attendance requirement is technically 75%. We aim for 80. So there can be grant reductions. When we got the grant back in 2007, we did have several other schools on the list and weren't able to meet the attendance goal due to changing population. So we're pretty confident that we will continue this funding as long as there is a need.
So just to clarify, you were just talking about ACEs, right? And you said the limit is like 80%, or that's the goal. So we're not, for George Hall, we're not actually meeting that right now.
That is correct. And that has been an ongoing issue since the start of the grant at George Hall and continually decreases. There was kind of a forgiveness year last year due to the pandemic. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking at this year, or excuse me, for the 22-23 school year, is ways to, how can we, as best possible, reach the families that need the care and meet the requirements so that we can keep the funding.
Okay, and then I had a question about the AM enrollment. I just noticed like there's like such like huge differences between certain schools. And what's the student to staff ratio for the I guess specifically for AM? Is it the same for AM and PM? And like what's the ratio?
Yes, so it's a 1-to-20 ratio. In general, we've had less than that in the mornings, usually because we have less staff. That requires usually an 8-hour staff person. So it just varies from site to site. So currently at, Audubon just changed to do some staffing. Baywood, for example, has 2 staff, but only 19 families want morning care or are able to pay for it. So they do have 2 staff, but only 20 students. So it varies from site to site. Beach Park has 1 staff, Beresford has 1. It just depends.
What does it depend on?
The staffing?
Yeah, like I'm just curious, like for you mentioned Baywood specifically, like there's 2 staff with the ratios 1-to-20. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah. So about of the 40-ish staff that we have, about half of them are 8-hour employees. You can see that our AM enrollment is lower. So in that sense, we are overstaffed in the mornings. If there was a demand for AM care at a particular site, let's say there were 40 more families at Audubon, we could certainly move staff there to accommodate that demand, but we're not seeing that across the board.
Okay. And then for other sites that are like, let's say like the 3, 4, 5s, is that just 1 staff there? Or are there any cases where there's 2 staff at like anything under 10? I'm just curious.
Yes, so there are cases where there are 2 staff for 3, 4, or 5 students. In general, we try to keep staff at 1 site so that they can build those relationships with parents and families and teachers. So historically, the 2 staff at Parkside, for example, have been there. So actually, I stand corrected. They have been there, but we just moved 1 staff member from Parkside to support attendance at Sunnybray in the morning only. So he returned to Parkside in the afternoon. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a plan to have more alignment with where there's greater need? Like, I'm just like maybe some of that staff can support the district, like the other district needs instead of. I just think like having 2 staff for like 4 kids doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I know there's like a lot of other ways that staff can support students and still build relationships, even maybe at their exact school site. But I just feel like, what do you think about that?
So that's a future consideration. As you know, we're always playing with staffing depending on the needs of students. As our staffing schedule changes, we have some staff who are in school, and so their schedules change. It's a moving pieces kind of game. So that's something that we're looking at for the future, especially as we know there's many vacancies for paraeducators. But we also want to hold true to their jobs and their job descriptions, and the connection that they bring, right, when you see the same person from the morning into the evening.
Okay, last question. This, and I think this is a question for you, but it might be like a question for like someone else. Are we, I know like there's such a huge need for childcare, and so, you know, our district, you know, this is childcare before school, after school. I'm just wondering, I think actually Shar brought this up a long time ago. Like, is there a way that we could, is there a way or is there a plan to kind of explore whether we could do like a sliding scale to meet the needs of families who need this kind of care but aren't able to afford it financially?
Patrick or Dennis, can I answer? Do you want to chime in?
Please, Daniel, please. We've talked a lot about it.
Yeah, you know, this has been kind of an interesting year coming off of the pandemic. The trends that we saw prior to COVID are totally different, and we're still seeing families come out of working from home and having other arrangements. So it's difficult to say. The other piece that we have to consider is that we didn't generate really any revenue last year, and we are a revenue-based program. You know, we exist because of our tuition, and so while we know that there's a need, we also know that we don't have enough staff to expand, and we have to pay that staff based on tuition. And so again, it's one of those puzzle pieces. We meet with Patrick almost every other week as we look to next year to figure out what we can offer, whether that's sliding scale or looking at different programming options. We have always been a 5-day program, but you know, that's something to explore as the needs of families change. Yeah. So I don't have any concrete answers, but it's all fair game, you know, as long as we're serving our students, that's our goal.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I'm just glad that there's like that it's kind of on the radar at least. So I'll stop there.
And Danielle, can you give us a little bit more information about the way that we implement the ACES program at Sunnybray, Lead, George Hall, and Fiesta Gardens, and specifically, you know, to what extent that program is available to families regardless of income? In other words, is there a requirement that you meet only a certain income in order to participate in the ACES program at those schools, or does it operate differently?
Yeah, one of the amazing things about the ACES grant is that if you've worked with grants, you know, there's usually lots of rules to follow. The rules are kind of general. The grant is awarded to the school site and its students. So there is no income verification. There is no picking and choosing. It is awarded to the school site for a certain number of students. So at Sunnybray, for example, our grant covers 60 students. So we do our best to work with staff, teachers, principals, community workers to target students who might be in a crisis situation, but anyone is eligible as long as they attend that school site and are willing to come every day and stay until 5:30. So that's it, which is kind of mind-boggling, but also amazing in terms of access. You know, the only drawback is the number of spaces that we have, and that's due to that's on the state. You know, we can't serve the whole school.
Great. Actually, I have a follow-up question. Trustee Corrs has brought up some really interesting points. Staffing wise, or actually attendance wise, you talked about the 80% and everything. How much does the attendance or the number of spots or the number of students that we have in our annex program fluctuate over the years? Because it does seem like I can understand if we have maybe 2 teachers there, but yet maybe, it fluctuates because, at the beginning of the year when we staffed, we had 10, 20 students, but then because people's needs change, or because we're still sort of in the pandemic world where we have a lot of people still working at home, maybe they don't need it. Does it fluctuate quite a bit, or actually does it stay pretty stable throughout the year?
It does fluctuate, especially at certain times of the year. This is my 6th year with the annex. The number of students that we've been able to serve has decreased due to changes in staffing. So as staff leave, retire, move on to other professional careers, if we're not able to hire more staff, then we can't offer those spaces. So that has changed. That's one piece. And then, we see some changes, July, August, of course, as family plans have changed, December-ish, sometimes March and June. But otherwise, not drastic changes, I would say.
Okay, great. And then I guess the follow-up question is about sort of promotion in some ways. I mean, I'm assuming that you talked about reaching out to certain families who we definitely really want to hit, but is there sort of a broad promotion of like, hey, just FYI, new incoming parents or families, we have an annex program here, right? I know at my children's only one of them go there, but the elementary school there's actually 2 programs. There's the annex program and then there's Newton. And so one's run by us and at a very much a different cost basis in some ways versus the private program. And so I'm wondering whether or not do we promote in some ways like the annex program, like, hey, yeah, we have this here to sort of drum up more people attending.
Yeah, so traditionally we had a booth back in the days when we did kinder enrollment at Bayside. So that was our biggest pull for incoming families. Again, with COVID, things are being done a little differently. Last year, we essentially started from scratch. We didn't offer priority to previously enrolled families due to the pandemic and our significant change in staffing. So it was fair game to any and all. Messages were sent district-wide. This year we're hoping, as we look to next year, we're hoping to continue with the priority piece. What we heard from families is that the lack of priority was really difficult for families. They rely on childcare, right? Continuous childcare. So, we're still in a little bit of a gray zone coming out of the pandemic. In the past, we haven't had space available. We probably have more space available at schools now that is not common as it was before the pandemic. So it's a little tricky, but again, our information will go out to all schools once we have that timeline set, which we will hopefully soon.
No, great, thank you. Just that comment, I do remember there's that kindergarten event over at Bayside when my kids were going to it. So I'm glad that there was a booth there. And then I guess just one question. I know Superintendent Cho, I think we're having a meeting with a lot of the preschools that feed into our school district. I'm wondering whether or not we can just promote and just let the preschools know that we do have an annex program as well. And therefore that some of the information where obviously we're still dealing with COVID, but could maybe be disseminated through that meeting and through those providers too. So that was a question.
Absolutely, we can absolutely do that.
Thank you.
I have one question around staffing. So I know, in general in this area, like staffing is a huge challenge. It's a huge, we've talked about that in a variety of different contexts. I guess my question is around just what are there things that we think we could do that would help that? Are our salaries for this program competitive with other districts? How do they compare? Do we have people leaving for just kind of what does that look like? And I know everything is a balance. And so if you say yes, our salaries are lower than whatever, right? That's obviously something we would need to discuss, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, and feel free to chime in. Our salaries are competitive. And when you take into account the benefits of child healthcare benefits and retirement. That's huge, right? That's 30% in addition to our listed salaries. So yes, any increase to salaries, of course, goes through the union. So that's a game we have to play, you know, with a larger CSEA group, and affects our tuition, right? Because our tuition pays for all of our annex salaries. So yes, it's a balance. We reached out to community colleges. Even those child development programs are finding that their students are not working in their fields for whatever reason. We still have a lot of programs that are doing classes online. So people are still not out in the field. We do job fairs, we advertise on different boards. HR is another team that we work closely with, just looking for ways to fill those positions. In general, it's people who are retiring. So we have some wonderful staff who have been here for many, many years. We have some younger staff who are finishing their degrees and looking for opportunities in their chosen fields. And then we have people who move away. So it's been kind of again, the pandemic really kind of hit us hard, but we are always looking for ways to entice people to work for us and fill the numerous positions that we have. That is not specific to just our district, right? Yeah.
I had a question just following up on what Trustee Corzo talked about potentially having a sliding scale. To me, when I look at the enrollment and I see a school that maybe has 3 or 5 people in the morning and 30 people in the afternoon, it seems to me that there's a gap between the 1 to 20 ratio. There's kids there, but there's space left over to meet that ratio. And I'm just wondering, have we considered offering spots, since the staff's there anyways, to people that maybe can afford the tuition but have a need for childcare? That's my question.
Yes, it's another one of those pieces that we've looked at. It's complicated to do in the middle of the year when we have families who have been paying, and so then to institute another program or a different type of fee schedule. Again, coming out of COVID, we're also really focused on our revenue, and so any changes that we make to our fee schedule has to support the entire program. So it's something that we've discussed but aren't ready to commit to.
Okay, I was just thinking, like, if you have one staff person with 5 children in the morning, it seems to me anything that the other 15 kids could pay would add to revenue. So I would just be curious if we could find a way to add more students that may need childcare, or I guess families that need childcare.
For sure, that's something that we can look at. We've also focused on our ACES, the 4 ACES school sites. Our ACES grant does not cover morning care, but we have redistributed staff to allow those families to come in the morning to support the homeschool connection, the full day piece, and to support being on time to school attendance, right? We have some schools where being tardy is a huge issue. So we have found that to be beneficial. So that has been our main focus, but yeah, we'll definitely take that into consideration.
Any other clarifying questions? This might be our record here for clarifying questions. Okay, Peter, would you mind going to the public, and let's open up public comment on this item, please.
Absolutely. Any members of the public that would like to make comment on this item, please use the raise your hand functionality within Zoom now. Okay. Right now we have Randy. Randy, go ahead.
Hi, good evening again. So I think that, the Annex and ACES that offers an invaluable service to families. And it's wonderful to have this option provided so that families can devote their attention to work during work hours, be available to that so that then they can be available to their family during family time. What's confusing to me, admittedly, is this really huge increase in in the tuition for annex. Why is that happening? You know, and I, as you know, I attend every single one of these board meetings. I hear, you know, wow, the district is flush with cash. Oh, we have all this cash. We have all these hires in spite of decreasing enrollment in the district, right? And so, so why the pressure on this? Why the pressure on the families to cough up even more money? And this is especially, you know, probably all of you, I just got my tax bill in the mail. On there is Measure T that I voted for and Measure V that I voted for, you know, and then you're coming back to the families, and not everybody has those same kinds of resources. There are folks that are just getting by. Why does it have to be this way? Especially when ratios have gone down from what they, well, whatever. Child to teacher or provider ratios have increased from what they used to be. And there's been spots that were taken away, I think 3 years ago. So I have a hard time reconciling all of this. Just as, you know, I mean, I'm not a money person. I'm just a family member and a community member that's trying to understand this. And I'm most concerned about the families that are right there on the margins that, you know, find this very, very difficult. And this just adds a lot more stress on the day-to-day living when they don't have this as an option, especially when they have multiple kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. President Chen, we have no other hands for public comment.
Great. Thank you for that public comment. I'm officially closing public comment on this item and bringing this back to the board. This is an informational item, so there's no actual vote. So any further discussion from the board and direction is appropriate at this time.
Yeah, so I will start. As someone that has personally struggled finding childcare, even being on this board and you know, having higher income than many other families in our community, I really have been trying to dig into and understand, and I think, you know, this is why we have this item on our agenda tonight, because I realized that I felt like there was a disconnect between, like you mentioned, right? Like our annex program is, you know, brings revenue to the district. I think that was a decision made many years ago when our district was not in the financial situation that we're in now. And so I think this is like the perfect time to reassess and really decide that, like, we need to go in a different direction that meets the needs of all families and that is equity focused and actually is supporting the families that need care the most, the kids that need additional support after school to support their academic growth in our schools. And you know, I will say that I understand, right? Like there's from what I've seen from families and other people in the community, there's like this huge need for childcare. It's like well known in our county. There's like, you know, a ton of work been done to try to address it. But, you know, what in this county, we have a lot of jobs and also a lot of people struggling to, you know, pay rent, pay for childcare, and like really thrive, right? Like a lot of people are just getting by. And so I really feel like it's the right time to like assess how we are, how we're meeting the needs of our own families. I know, you know, I was on the soccer field last weekend with my son and his team and other families, and we started talking about childcare. And a friend of mine started sharing with me that, you know, she had tried Annex, and then, you know, because her child was in sports and couldn't be there, you know, all the time, and there was, you know, it was just this 5-day schedule, she couldn't, like, you know, pay a less amount, like pay less and only like what the childcare that she needed. And that's a huge barrier, right? So that like excludes a lot of families, like even my own, right? Like Mikey, my son is in soccer twice a week, and sometimes, you know, he goes with his dad, and so I wouldn't need like 5 days a week, but I could use like a good 2 or 3, you know. And I think there's a lot of families in our district that have that need, have similar needs. And then I'm also, you know, I was thinking about George Hall and specifically the ACEs program and how there's kind of a gap there. And I started just thinking, and my wheels were turning, and I'm like, could it be because of transportation? Like, you know, is that maybe like an issue? I don't know, right? It's just something that I started thinking about, right? Like, you know, would there be, when I was growing up and when I was a student in the school district, there was this huge after school childcare center at back then Turnbull. And so, you know, there was essentially like it was literally called Latchkey. And I went to Latchkey and I loved it. And I did like a ton of puzzles and a ton of learning and a ton of activities. And like, I have really fond memories of it. But that was a way that, like, you know, families didn't have to worry about like, oh, like my kid's at George Hall, but he goes there on the bus, and, you know, how am I going to pick him up afterwards? Like they would, you know, the students would come back to North Central on the bus and then be in childcare until their parents could pick them up in the neighborhood. So I think that's really something that we need to consider again, because I mean, from what I have seen, there is a need. I also think that I'd love to see us be able to like get more ACEs spots, and I don't know like what exactly needs to be done to make that happen, right? But I do think, like Allison's point about, you know, if there's a program that's, you know, if there's an AM, you know, cohort or classroom, and there's 2 staff and, you know, 4 families that are paying, but yet there's like all this space that like for families that could potentially use it if they only knew, and if we made a decision to offer that. We can't know if families would use it until we offer it, right? Even if it's free, like it's in a way, it's already, you know, the staff are already being paid. So
I just wanted to add a couple things and echo a couple things that I heard some of you mention. We've not really explored the transportation component, Noelia, too much, because there's so many different locations throughout the district that are accessible. We can follow up on that and certainly have that dialogue. Some of the things that we've talked about too, as you heard Danielle and Tiffany were really articulate tonight, speaking to you about the challenges, right? It's this complex and kind of unique challenge we have this year, because there are waiting lists, but there's decreased participation, right? There's that complexity. We have the challenge of staffing as well too. That's another complexity. And we have some of that rate history too. We made some adjustments to that rate history, or that actual rate that was being charged, in order for the program to not operate in a deficit. So the current year is not planned to generate money. Historically, this program has been considered an enterprise fund, and an enterprise fund for a district generates money, as you well know, right? But we're not looking at that for the current year. And I know some of the things you mentioned too, we've talked about as well too, about, you know, we have some wonderful communications that Diego Perez is generating for the district, and outreach, right, to and awareness about this. But we've also wrestled with as a team too, the fact, as Ken said earlier too, about we believe some of the diminished participation is because some people are still working at home, and that may not change. So do you ramp up when you have staffing, when you have some participation that's really low, 4 kids in the morning and some afternoon? So we're wrestling with all these different factors, and so I just wanted to share with you a little about the financial piece too, which is it's not anticipated to generate revenue. We're looking to try and break even, and we're trying to calibrate those rates so we break even. But some of those things you mentioned too, that's part of our active conversation too. Dennis is involved in the conversation too about how do we meet the needs of the community. That's the much larger umbrella we're trying to look at it from. And then looking at this program, which is an enterprise fund, not becoming an encroachment on the general fund, right? So we're trying to find that balance, but it's a great conversation, and we're going to continue to wrestle with, like Danielle says, we've had a lot of meetings, and we're trying to, the big picture is like you're saying, it's like meeting the needs of the community, because we know there's a need, but also looking at the rates we're charging too, we're understanding that those rates are similar to what a lot of other rates are being charged. It was the first time we did an increase, I think, in our district in quite a few years, if I'm not mistaken. We did that last year. So we don't want to do it arbitrarily. We want to look at this program to certainly at a minimum break even and not become an encroachment for the district, but also more importantly, meet the needs of the community too, and look for those opportunities like Danielle and Dennis are looking into what additional ACES funding might we be able to generate. When we look at what other districts are generating for that program, which are close by, is substantially higher than what we have. So that's just a few thoughts for you.
I think to add to that, one of the big conversations that Danielle, Tiffany, and I are having with Patrick is this idea of a drop-in program. What would that look like to get parents to know, Noelle, your point of my child may only need it 2 days a week, right? And we recognize that that would be a really great way to not just provide services, but to have add to the revenue if needed. But I think a lot of districts are able to provide a varied schedule. It's not 5 days a week. It doesn't have to be before and after school. But then, it becomes very complex. But that is a goal that we have. So looking at that.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just kind of, what I'm thinking now is actually like, it sounds like it would be more complicated to try to like, fill like, let's say an AM class with 2 teachers and only 4 kids. Like, I actually think it'd make more sense to like not have 2 teachers there and move those teachers to where there's a higher need and meet needs elsewhere. I understand, staff might want to stay at their school, but we're trying to meet the needs of kids here, and that has to come first. I will say that I totally understand, like for me, I'm looking at it like big picture and just, again, right? It's for me, it's like the what is meeting the community needs, meeting the needs of our families, meeting the needs of our students. And I think overall, like my hope and what I would like to see is that we have more of an equity focus and not like a revenue focus. And, we did have a public speaker that mentioned Measure V and Measure, what did she say, T?
Yeah.
T. I'm like, I helped pass one of those. Why don't I remember all the letters? But I do think, I understand we don't want it to like eat out of the general fund, and that's valid. But if there's a way to like ensure that like we're actually supporting academic growth and being equity focused, then I wouldn't mind spending some of that out of our general fund if it's going to be supportive to the learning of students. So I'll stop there. Thank you though. Thank you for listening.
Piggyback on that. Thank you guys for sharing, for the update. Yeah, I think I'm also thinking about kind of just general, again, I think my theme for the past couple of weeks has been around like just alignment for the district as we think about the strategic plan and being super, equity focused and kind of what that's going to bring forward and how that then filters into all of these systems and structures and how all of that aligns to inequities that are involved in all of our systems and structures. And so kind of to Trustee Corzo's point, I think, so I guess my first thing is I would love for this to come back as a part of the conversation when we talk about the strategic plan. Is this something that the community, that this stakeholder group and our board want to be included in that plan, whether it's this year or whether in 4 years, right? as kind of a first point, and how do we then integrate that into kind of this larger strategic conversation. I think there are lots of things that come up that are important that won't be in the strategic plan. I'm not saying that this is one of them, but should it not be one of them? And this is not annex specific. I'd be interested in having kind of all of our departments essentially have like their own kind of strategic plan aligned to the equity vision overall, right? Like, what are the things that we do as a department that are going to move the needle on the various equity issues that have been identified? And how do we do that, whether or not it's something that we as a board are talking about on a consistent basis, or whether or not it's a part of the official strategic plan. I know I asked for that with our special education department, to have like a strategic plan. I don't know if strategic plan is the right word, right? But almost to have like a scope and sequence over the course of, you know, a couple of years to think about some of these issues, because as a part of that conversation is the question, right, that Trustee Corso was bringing up. Do we want this still to be a revenue focus, or is this actually an investment because it's going to get us to some of the goals that we have, in which case we stop having the conversation about whether or not this is generating money and start having the conversation about how we're meeting the needs of kids because we think it's going to drive achievement, we think it's going to support social emotional learning, like, right? And then we're testing to see whether or not that's happening based on the investment that we're making, just like other investments. So it just changes the nature of the conversation. So yeah, that's kind of like what I'm thinking about as we're having this conversation. And I'm glad that we're having it, because we haven't had this conversation since I've been on the board, right? Around like, what is the intention? Should that be the intention? And I think as you start to approach all of these systems really with an equity lens, like these are the kinds of conversations we should be having and be thinking about and grappling with. And, again, you can't do everything. So it's not me saying like, we definitely should right now, just say like, this isn't going to be revenue generating, or we're going to flip the script, or, just like that, because we can't do that with everything and do it well and still have, be a good financial standing. I completely understand that, but I do think it should be a part of the larger conversation. The only other thing I guess I'll say is just, it was my idea many years ago. First, when you said that, I was like, what are you talking about? The sliding scale. I think it was related to—
Told you.
I think it was related to preschool at the time. But I do think we hear a lot about kind of like in general, and of course in our district, right? Like the missing middle, which in this area is like huge. And so I think that I would definitely like for us to explore that as something that we do next year. And, to Trustee Proctor's point and Trustee Corso's point, right? Like if we're essentially already paying for it, anything additional is going to be revenue. And so if we're still looking at it in that way, and if we stop looking at it in that way, then it doesn't really matter, right? So I would definitely like for that to be something that we are considering. And actually reminds me that I don't know if we ever came back to that at the preschool, and I don't know where we are with that. So that'd be something I would like when we have a preschool update for us to circle back to, is the sliding scale there. So yeah, some of those are like annex specific. Some of those are just like more big picture specific that, or not big picture specific, big picture, non-specific. Done. Thank you.
I think my thoughts on the annex, I mean, if I heard you correctly, Danielle, you were saying that you're looking at getting the grant for Laurel and San Mateo Park. I heard that correctly, correct? Okay, so then we would have 2 more schools that would be covered by the ACES grant. So a total of 6 schools at that point. I think that's great. In reviewing what Prop 49, which is where the ACES grant comes out of, just basically the official summary is it makes every public elementary, middle, and high school eligible for after-school grants ranging from 50,000 to 75,000, and maintains a local funding match requirement. And then it also places additional priority for additional funding to schools with predominantly low income. So I'm going to make the assumption that we're trying to go for the max on the grant that we can and get the most bang for our buck. I'm hopeful. To speak to, rethinking annex, it sounds to me like what we have in place hasn't really changed much, in terms of how many days we're offering. You pay one fee, you go 5 days a week or not, but you're still paying one fee. I know preschool has, which is their other fee-based program, has it so that, some kids and some schools will attend 2 days or some will attend 3 days, and you pay different prices accordingly. It seems to work for preschool. I don't understand why we can't apply that to Annex or another fee-based program. So I would love to see that. I love the idea of a drop-in program, because some days, as a parent, you just need to not pick your kids up from school right away. For whatever reason, whether it's a mental health afternoon that you need to take, or you actually have something scheduled. Because parenting is super hard. And as I said earlier, we're very grateful to our teachers and our Annex staff for caring for our children as you do. So those would be things that I would really like to see taken into account, and just keep, I would hope that you would keep that in part of your planning and conversation around that. And then just to the equity piece, yeah, I mean, there is such a need. I'm thinking of my children's friends at their school. What is the sacrifice the families are making because they can't afford the childcare? How does that work? My daughter's best friend has a mother that works 3 jobs, and she can barely get her child to school on time. Comes home or comes to the school, picks up the child, and tries to figure out somebody to care for the child as she goes to her next job. It's these kids that I'm afraid will fall through the cracks. It's these kids who I worry may not be able to access their education because they're having to move so many different places and pieces and go between so many different adults that information about Footsteps to Brilliance or information about ST Math or homework in general, somebody to read with, gets lost in the mix. And I see Annex as being able to function as somewhat of a safety net for that. So I think making it accessible to those who really need it, I think is something that we should really strive for.
I will be brief. Thank you for the presentation. This has been very informative and I appreciate it. So I am an accountant, and so I think numbers all the time. And my brain and also my heart just says just fill up the spaces with people that need it. Let's just help families that have a need for childcare. Also, being somebody that looks at numbers, I do see that the increase for both the PM and the AM PM combo is over 42%. That seems like a huge jump to me, and I feel like we're probably going to price out some families that really need childcare, and so I'm kind of concerned about that. I did just look at some other after school care that's popular in Foster City that I know of, and it's kind of in line with that price, but they're not having those huge increases, a 42% increase. So I'm just a little worried that we're going to be excluding families that really need this care and won't be able to afford it. So I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation and seeing how we might be able to look at the Annex program differently going forward. So thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. And you guys have been up here for a long time, so I'll try and summarize my comments as much as I can. I will definitely say that this is a great topic to have a conversation about. But I also feel like we are in a weird area or a weird time right now, right? I mean, with the workforce still in some ways working from home and the needs of parents are constantly changing. Although I do think that the kids vaccine will have some sort of impact because I think a lot of people are still like keeping everybody close. It's an interesting time to have this sort of conversation. I think that Trustee Corzo had mentioned like George Hall and transportation. And, you know, I quickly looked and we actually don't bus any kids to George Hall, but we do have the big freeway that separates, you know, some of the enrollment area that goes to George Hall. So I do think that that is an issue. But I also think like back in the day, I remember the Village used to be really affordable. It used to be where people would go buy their first homes. And now you have the Village being very pricey. So I'm wondering if the economics have changed there in terms of when we originally got the ACES grant. So I think there's a lot of stuff going on, but it's a great conversation to have. I almost feel like because of COVID and the pandemic that we have this ability to not reset, but take a look at it and figure out what is our real purpose for the annex, what are our goals, and are we really more like just childcare, or are we more of like an extension of school? And it does make sense for us to really actually take a look at that. I don't necessarily know if maybe now is the time at the moment with the constantly changing environment with the workforce, but I do think it's an appropriate thing for us to talk about. So I would say that I would also love to continue the conversation, but I also know that it's, you know, depending on the time and depending on this, like figure out what really is going to happen. Like granted, last year was, we didn't have anybody at Annex, right? This year is a little bit different because everybody's still working from home or not. I'm curious to see what the following year is going to be like, and then whether or not, you know, what is our program really going to become, or what should it become? And maybe we have historically been one way where we're only charging and we're providing things for a certain segment of the population, but I think this board is very equity focused, and I think the idea is that we may want to actually look at broadening our horizons and providing services to more families that need it. So yeah, I think it's a great conversation to have. I thank you, and I really appreciate that you guys have been up here for so long on this topic. So with that, I think I'm going to end this item and move us on, and you guys can move off of the podium. So thank you. Okay, we have, oh, look at that, just board member statements and requests for future agenda items. I can definitely say that after the last topic, we probably would want to talk about the annex program again at some future date, but does anybody else want to make a statement or request for future agenda items?
I would like to request that we place ethnic studies on the agenda. We have, actually the state, I believe, has adopted a model curriculum, and I think it would be a good idea for us to, you know, learn about where the state is with that process, learn about what other districts are doing with integrated ethnic studies, and like, let's say, yeah, I'll just stop there. But I did myself learn about some of that from a fellow trustee from the Belmont Redwood Shores school district, who is a part of a PISMA. I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but I believe it's a organization of Asian American board members across the state. And so like Amy Koo from the Belmont Redwood Shores School District had this really amazing presentation that she shared with the API caucus about a month ago. And I got to, you know, I was there and I was able to learn, and I think it'd be really good for us to have that information and then to consider how we can explore that in our district. I know we're also going to do the strategic plan and we want to align and everything, but we can't integrate something if we don't like discuss it first, right? So
any other statements or requests for future agenda items? I'll just make one statement. A while back, Governor Newsom talked about the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of the pandemic. And I personally feel like we have made major steps towards the end of the tunnel today, not today, this week with the vaccination of the kids 5 to 11. I will say that it's fantastic that we're moving this direction, but I also would caution us because we have kids in our district who are not 5 yet. So through the preschool program or through the Montessori or early, programs that we have, it doesn't solve everything for our district. So I will definitely say that I'm really happy and very optimistic about where we're going as vaccinations come out, and I hope that everyone gets vaccinated if you choose to, and I'm pretty excited about it. So. Okay, let's move on. Future meeting dates, Superintendent Ochoa.
Thank you, President Chin. We have a upcoming school board meeting November 18th. We have an upcoming school board meeting on December 16th. The Board of Trustees also has a special board meeting, school visitation, November 9th. This is a traveling show on this particular day. We start at Audubon at 9 in the morning, transition to Brewer Island, and then end our morning at Beach Park Elementary School.
Great, thank you, Superintendent Ochoa. Last item is adjournment. Does anyone want to make a motion for adjournment?
I will make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Thank you, Trustee Watkins for motion, Trustee Corzo for the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we are officially adjourned at 8:43. Thank you everyone for attending our meeting.